Matthew Thomas, Chief People Officer for the City of Stirling in Western Australia.
When we talk about human-centred design anchored by technology, so in a sense, how technology integrates into the council, what does that look like in practice? Is it does it change processes, tools, capability, or culture?
Well, I think if it's done really well, it affects all those sorts of things when you think about it. So there's a tendency when we think about building platforms that we focus that the technology is the solution. But at the end of the day, my analogy is that it should always be under the technology is kind of under the hood. It's kind of enabling you to be able to be new ways of working, changing the experience that people have with how they use technology. And so whether that's around efficiencies, whether it's around being able to find and navigate things where it takes one click rather than 15 clicks, and then it frees up time, I suppose, in the sense of more value-adding work that requires human intervention or human interaction. I mean, they're the kind of really core things. And I think it's about, tends to be a bit of a fear around technology, especially when you think about it from an AI lens. Whereas I'd probably say that we've got to redefine the thing. At the end of the day, whether we like it or not, technology and AI are always going to be there. So it's a constant. So it's finding ways for us to make sure that we embed it in a really safe, ethical way, but at the same time, highlight, I suppose, how it's value to both an organisation from a financial perspective, business outcomes, community perspective, but also how people engage within the workforce.
I always find it fun doing interviews now to see how long it takes for AI to come up within the interview, because no matter what we're talking about, AI is seen as a feature nowadays. It's coming to every part of the workforce. And so, like, I mean, going on that AI point, where have you found it? Where have you found AI uplifting processes, and where has it not been worth it?
Well, fortunately, so far, I would say I haven't found anything where it's not worth it, to be honest. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think with any sort of implementation of technology, and again, including, I suppose, encompassing AI and that, it's about how you do it in a really systematic, fit-for-purpose way. So by doing that, you then mitigate the risk of it kind of not landing, or potentially we try and go for the really gold-plated, shiny stuff from an AI perspective. But if you don't have the foundations in place in the sense of good processes, ways of working, the data being right, well, then that's when it usually fails. I think I would say I was a very early adopter from, I suppose, technology way back, probably about 10 years, where I was using a robot to actually conduct interviews. And I think in that was a really good insight to understand that technology can't be the single source that makes decisions. If you think about it from a HR perspective, we say recruitment's a really good example of that. It should be a source of information to help make a more informed decision, but it shouldn't be the sole decision to make a decision. And I think you've seen globally out there where, you know, even big companies like Google and Microsoft, where they've tried to solve the solution, but effectively they've done the opposite, because the way that they've built the technology is actually disadvantaged or discounted people of colour or diversity, which is what they were trying to bring into their, I suppose, into their workplace. So I would say I'm fairly fortunate to say that we haven't had any sort of roadblocks at this stage, but I think it's just about how you actually navigate and plan it. In essence, it's a new way of working. I think that's how we have to frame it. I think we sometimes focus too much on referencing technology, and that becomes then almost like that's not going to fix everything. And the reality is there's no perfect system. I say that if there was a perfect, for instance, in our world, HR, perfect human capital system, everyone would have it. I would have sold it. I would have had my own island like Richard Branson, because everyone would be using my technology. But the reality is there's no one single system, because there's certain nuances or requirements for each organisation. It's understanding how to leverage that in a really sort of effective and purposeful way.
Exactly. And speaking of AI, well, not just AI, but other technologies, as you've referenced the robot that you used in HR in interviews, and other technologies that other companies require. How do you weigh up the governance, privacy, security when introducing it?
Well, I think again, it's about how the information is used. So I'll give a good example. So we use a platform called Smart Recruits for our recruitment. It's very much based on AI, but the AI is only based upon information that we put into the system. So the way that the AI works is it basically looks at your position description that you write and your job ad, which you write, to then make a decision around if someone's applying for a role, what's their rating based upon that. So when you think about governance, it's all in our control. It's how we actually write the ad or how relevant our position description. So there's no risk around that. I think, obviously, from a broader context, when you look at our sort of digital harmony strategy that sits under the technology stream, obviously there's bigger considerations when you start talking bigger systems like, you know, your RMSs, your Salesforce, and those things around how AI is potentially utilising data that maybe it shouldn't. So it's about having those sort of policies in place and those guardrails in place around what you can have access to and not. I think the other thing I would say is that the bigger systems, even from a HCM perspective, are now looking at how they bring in, for instance, AI within their own system. So it's only accessing information that's actually relevant to the system. So Workday being a good example of that. So I think systems are almost creating the safety net and the governance net by the way that they're being created, which then mitigates having to worry about access, people being able to see stuff around personal information, for instance, where they should have access to it.
Perfect. So like, if another council wanted to improve their people experience, their survey outcome by introducing technologies like you guys have, what would you suggest they should do over the next 6-12 months?
Well, I think we go back to before you even look at the technology, like I said, is the enable it. So it's about understanding, I suppose, again, in context of my world from a HR perspective, have you got all your foundation? We use recruitment as a good example. Have you got all the processes in place? So there's no point starting looking at technology. You haven't got a robust process in the sense of how you do recruitment from end to end. And understanding what the parameters around that, and then you start to look at where are your pain points. So it might be it takes, I don't know, 8 weeks to get from putting a job ad out to actually filling out, you know, finding a person. Well, that in the current market, you're going to lose people pretty quickly. So then it's about looking at what technology or improvements you could make using technology that actually would streamline some of that process quick enough. So kind of reduce the time from, I don't know, ad out to interviewing, and then the human element then starts to play its part. So I think it's looking at where those efficiencies are. What's the biggest problem you're trying to solve for is kind of where we start from. Like, what are you trying to solve for? And then how do you fix that both from your own processes, but also how can sometimes technology help support or enable that improvement or that efficiency to make it better? So I think it's about keeping it small. I think we have a tendency to think big. And the risk of that is that you actually tend to be gold plating things that don't need to be gold plated. I think also too, when you're thinking about technology, it's about not just looking at short term, like what are you going to implement that potentially is going to make it even more efficient longer term? Because sometimes the risk is we look at systems and we look at it from a perspective that's going to fix a problem now, but then we maybe want to do something different where we have to go and get another system, which means we're creating more complexity for our people in the sense of their experience having to use different systems to access different things. So I suppose it's just a bit of being very clear up front about what's the problems that you're trying to solve, and then what's the best way of doing that, both from a human and a technology element.
Yeah, I guess as well, with all the introduction, and my mind always goes back to AI, but with all the introduction of new technologies, there has to be that learning stage as well from the different people that either use it or are benefiting from it, to understand that the trust for that new technology and how it benefits them in their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you think about like some of the stuff that we're experiencing, because we're about to implement Workday, which is unheard of for councils in Australia. I think we're the second one in Australia to actually implement Workday. And I'd used it previously when I was at Commonwealth Bank. But, you know, one problem we're trying to solve is the fact that we have to fill out timesheets, manual timesheets, from a CEO downwards. So that's quite a heavy burden when we think about the effort that goes into that, and then the leaders have to sign it off, and then payroll have to manually process those timesheets and the risk of errors and stuff. And we've got employees that have been doing manual timesheets for 39 years, and now we're going to ask them to actually use their phone to actually start and stop, you know, clock in. And there's a fear factor behind that. So yeah, the learning is really important. It's about being very transparent, being very open, and then making sure whatever learning you do is actually fit the purpose for the individual. Mm-hmm. So the person that's doesn't like using phones, worried about privacy, fills out a timesheet every 39 years versus someone that might be at our pools, the younger generation, where that's all they want to do is use their phone, you know, to click in, clock off, those types of things. So it's been making sure that we're really clear around the interventions, I suppose, or the artifacts we have to do to invest the training and learning, but their adoption's only successful based upon meeting their needs rather than just doing a one blanket all approach.
So finally, to end on, you'll be at the Local Government Focus Day on the 27th of August. What's one thing you would hope that attendees take away from your session?
I think just a bit of awareness. I hope people will just take away the fact that we're all dealing the same problems, and it might have different scales that come from different lenses, but it's not scary. I think we've got to take away this fear factor around how technology creates more burden. It's about understanding how it adds value and in its most simplest way. So rather than trying to always think about solving big problems, like what's the one problem I can solve? Start there, start small, get your foundations in place, and then technology will just be a great enabler to be able to deliver on the things that you're looking at doing.
Thank you very much.